So this week is the Oscar week.
And we have Tonkocast number 13.
That's right. So who's our guest?
This week we have Academy nominee Robert Valley.
That's right, Robert Valley. Robert Valley is one of the legendary independent animation filmmakers.
Yeah, his animation has really been, I think it's so specific and so unique and so beautiful. The first time I really got to sit down with his work, it was for Massive Swerve, his first short. That was really nothing quite like it.
Right. And then, his skills kind of extended through the projects like, the music band Gorillaz music videos. Tron. And the Beatles
Garage Band introduction.
And so it's a really distinct animation style. And then he did this animated short, Pear Cider and Cigarettes.
Right, and he worked with you a little bit, very briefly, on the Sketch Travel.
Yes, yeah. He's a very unique person, crazy person. But yeah, his art really reflects his personality, I feel like, especially this movie. I feel like out of all the 5 nominated animation short films, his, to me, was the most personal because it is based off of his personal experience.
Yeah, so here's our talk with Robert Valley.
Thank you so much for making time for us to talk to me and Robert for Tonkocast.
Anytime.
And it's really cool. This is the first time we're meeting, but you and Dice have known each other for a while. When did you guys meet?
It was through Sho, our mutual friend. Sho used to work with Robert at Mavericks, right? Sho, both of you, Robert had the studio in San Francisco, and we always heard about Robert from our friends, and but I don't think I really met you until we started talking to you about Sketch Travel. I mean, I met you maybe at Comic-Con because I was such a huge fan of your, Massive Swerve comics,
We might have had lunch or breakfast somewhere in the Bay Area with Sho.
Yeah, that's right.
I remember that. So it was, we had a mutual acquaintance. Is how we met.
Yeah, totally. And then, obviously, Sketch Travel is one big... Well, actually, you know what? Actually, we invited you for Totoro auction as well. I don't know if you remember.
I remember.
And you were very nice. You actually tried to do it. You were in London at the time, and you actually tried really hard to create this Totoro piece, and it just wasn't your thing. It just couldn't... it didn't quite work out. So, but really, the first project that I was lucky enough to work with Robert was on Sketch Travel.
Yeah, that's awesome.
That was a good one.
Your film, Pear Cider, got nominated for the Oscars, which we're so happy about, and we know that we've always, in the animation community, your work is so famous, well known, but it's really your personal film. I guess, is it correct that this is your second film?
Yeah, you could say that my little Massive Swerve short I did back in 2002. If you could call that a short film, that would have been my first attempt at independent filmmaking. But I learned a lot from doing that, and so when it came time to do this Pear Cider film, I kind of felt like I had a little bit of experience in sort of getting my head around completing a film project, and I think that was the key thing. Is I'm really big on finishing projects, and that's kind of, it's a tough thing to do. It's tough to keep yourself afloat financially while you're working on stuff without really a budget. It's a tough thing to to work on a film when your wife is bitching that you're spinning your wheels on something that might not have any payoff at the end of the day. So you got to kind of balance all these things out. And really, the only thing you're going by, in my case, with this Pear Cider film was, I'd be like, hey, maybe we might get an Oscar nomination. And she'd say, you and your dreaming. She'd say stuff like that. And I'd point to her, I'd say, you don't know. So, you got to sort of balance all that stuff out, right?
So now that you've got a nomination, has that made things better in that sense?
Oh, like for a day. And then it's right back to the old, why don't you go get a proper job? Go work at Disney again or something.
I can't imagine.
Can't you see the big picture? This is bigger than that. It's my own thing. And she's like, I like those weekly paychecks at Disney.
That's awesome. So what are, you talked a bit about like financing it, obviously too, like, the project runs for a while. What are some of like, you ran a Kickstarter kind of a Kickstarter to get some budget, but what were like the huge challenges doing this film? It's a long, it's a lengthy project, but a lengthy film, very personal, obviously, but where would you say are really the areas that were kind of hard times on the making the show?
Well, as far as production's concerned, and, in all fairness, I had a producing partner in London. Her name's Cara Speller, and she was with me from the very beginning of this animation project. Mm-hmm. And we discuss, the film and the edits, and she was kind of like, the only person I would talk to while I was working on it. Not to sound pathetic, but I just didn't have a lot of people I was interacting with. But as far as production's concerned, I was just kind of like right in this area where I am right now was kind of where I did the entire film. So I was kind of sitting here for the better part of 3 years, 2.5 years. And there were times, like a year into it, where, and this is a quote from Charlie Bean when I was working with him at Disney, and it just rang so true. He said to me one day, man, I feel like I'm swimming across the ocean and there's no land in either side. And all I can do is just keep swimming. And I thought, that kind of struck me about a year and a half in. Like, I was about 10 minutes into the animation. The end was nowhere in sight. And all I could do is just wake up in the morning and just keep sort of plugging away at it. So not to make it sound worse than it actually was, because I actually really enjoyed working on it, but I really had to sort of get my head around, it's sort of a mental game, you play when you're working on something. And in my case, it goes like this. I'm sitting here working on the scene, and I'm thinking, man, once I finish this scene, then I can work on the next scene. And then once I finish that, then I got 10 more seconds done. And then when I finish that 10 seconds, then after a couple months, then I might have 30 seconds done. You know what I mean? And you sort of, I'm thinking about the next thing, but the fact is I still haven't finished what I'm working on yet. And so what I really had to do was, it was an exercise in restraint and very much being completely focused in the scene that I was working on. Because a big part of the production schedule was making sure that every scene that I touched on any particular day, that I didn't have to come around and work on it a second time. So in other words, and this is sort of because I used to work in a restaurant, in the kitchen, and the idea was you clean as you go, so you're not making a mess. So that was kind of the thing I was thinking about is, every little thing, every scene I was working on, I was cleaning as I went, because there was nobody following behind me in the production pipeline. So if I didn't finish it, it would be me having to go back and visit the scene a year later or a year and a half later. So, and that would have been demoralizing to feel like you get to the end and then you got to go back and do like a cleanup pass from the beginning again. So there's a few little adjustments I had to do with my, with my psychological approach and my headspace to sort of keep myself not feeling overwhelmed when I was working on this project. So, but I was really into it. And like I said, I don't want to make it sound like it was an unpleasant experience, because it wasn't at all. I loved working on it. And, if it was more financially sustainable, I would do it all the time. So I guess that's the trick right now, is to try to figure out a way of doing another project, but I don't want to do it the way I did the last one.
Got it. Where did this story come from? Obviously, it is based off of your childhood friend. Can you talk a little bit about that, how you decided to do this story?
Yeah, well, Techno was a friend of mine, and we grew up together. And, in this world, in my world, I could count like the really, really good friends that I've had on one hand. And Techno was one of those buddies that, you have when you're young. And you kind of grow up with these people, and you just know them. You know what I mean? You know them like a really close friend. So the thing with Techno is that he was a year older than the rest of us. So he had hair in his armpits before the rest of us. He was shaving before the rest of us. He was fucking before the rest of us. He was driving before the rest of us. So, in this sense, he was kind of like the ringleader. Like if you were with Techno, he would always have to hold the bagged weed, or he'd always have to be the guy driving the car, or he'd have to be, you know what I mean? He's like that kind of guy. So that's what growing up with him was like, but he was always, if he was driving the car or whatever, he would always put you in some sort of situation where you'd be fearing for your life, or there'd be police sort of in pursuit, or, you know what I mean? It was always uncomfortable. For me, I didn't like that kind of stuff. I just wanted to, have fun and listen to music and this kind of thing. So, in my life, Techno was kind of a good friend like that. But Techno's life was troubled. And he went from one bad situation to another. And the thing with me and Techno was that I was kind of his friend when he didn't have any other friends, because he did burn a lot of bridges. And so, as a result, that's probably one of the reasons why I ended up going to China with him, because I guess he felt like, comfortable enough that he could sort of ask me, to sort of come out there and kind of help him through a tough situation. And so, when everything was said and done, the story had played itself out. I was in London, and I was telling the story to a friend of mine. His name's Hugo, and we were having some drinks outside of our local pub outside Passion Pictures. And he heard me tell the whole story, and he was convinced that it would, he thought it was a fascinating story, and he thought I should make a book or a film about it. And it took about 3 or 4 years of him persuading me with emails and phone calls and stuff. But finally I kind of broke down, and I ended up, I started doing a few panels, and I started playing around with it. And then, not to make this sound, like, more than it is, but the night that my son was born was the night that I wrote the whole script to Pear Cider and Cigarettes in like one sitting in the hospital. So I kind of felt like I was kind of sitting on the story for a period of about 4 years before it finally came out. And when it came out, it was a fully formed story, like it had already been kind of, written in my head. So, for better or worse, that's the script that I just kind of went with for the rest of the production. And it was pretty much unchanged since that first night.
At least out of all the nominated animated shorts, they're all really great movies, but yours was very, very much personal, and so it was really interesting to see, especially knowing you a little bit, how your world a little bit different, like the way I see the world and the way you live the world is very different, and just knowing you kind of made me appreciate how you shared your personal story like that in your style. And we always knew you as an incredible animation director, but this story was such a kind of deeply personal. And can you talk a little bit about, like, I read somewhere that you're still in touch with Tekno's family, and how are they kind of pretty excited that that the story is now out in a different way, the artistic kind of a form?
Yes, I kind of think they are. Over the Christmas holidays, Tekno's sister phoned me up out of the blue, because it's not like I get calls from her that often. And she says, "How's it going?" I said, I kind of knew where it was going, right? I said, "Oh yeah, it's fine." She goes, "So, I was at a Christmas party the other day." And I went, "Uh-huh." And she goes, "And I ran into a friend of ours that we went to high school with." And I went, "Uh-huh." And she says, "And apparently you did a film about my brother." And I went, "Didn't your father tell you?" And she went, "No." And then I said, "Okay, I'm coming over." So I got in the car and I drove over there, and we spent a few hours visiting, and it sort of felt like everything was sort of coming out, because Tekno's parents knew, but I kind of took for granted that that they were going to tell his sister. So that felt good. We were all sitting around and we were sort of reminiscing about Tekno, and I think it felt like they were feeling like Tekno might, like, he has a legacy that might live on the internet or wherever. And I think in a way they thought that was kind of cool, and they're excited about the Oscars. So all I can say is it was good feelings. You know what I mean? Yeah. It felt pretty good.
That's great. I mean, you talked a little bit about the nomination, and it was almost like your way of justifying all the craziness to your family, to your wife, and but what does it mean? I mean, as an artist, as a filmmaker, all the stuff you've been through, putting out the personal story, what does it mean, like, for you to be nominated? How does it change anything? Does it reinforce anything for you? Does it create opportunities of any kind?
Well, it's a little too early to really measure, where the opportunities. Mm-hmm. But even now, I've got a few proposals about doing similar kinds of work, and I couldn't really ask for more than that, because I would like to pursue like more adult-oriented type, hopefully kind of documentary-style animation. I think that would be, a perfect little genre for me to fall into. and uh, um, so a couple of proposals have presented themselves, and I've kind of been working on an idea with a friend of mine from London that we're kind of fleshing out right now. So if there's an opportunity to sort of present an idea, I think we're kind of ready to do that. So I've been advised to sort of start developing an idea just in case something like that was going to happen. So let's just say that they say success is when opportunity meets opportunity meets beer and weed.
Well, Robert, just knowing you a little bit and hearing so many fun stories about you from a lot of your good friends, I just have a hard time picturing you in a tux and just in the middle of this Oscar establishment. I don't want to call it establishment, but like that kind of a formality of organization. It seems you're just such a king of independent animated filmmakers, and you just, I know you don't really like working at studios and big companies, and you always wanted to be on your own, and you had your own studio, and how is that something you actually are looking forward to outside of this opportunity part, which we definitely understand there's going to be huge opportunity from this, but how is that, especially right now? I'm assuming, I don't know, like in terms of promotion, if you are, doing a lot of interviews and you have to, and obviously this is a part of it, but like, are you really busy just prepping for the Oscars next Sunday?
Well, in terms of the Oscars, apparently they're going to roll out the brown carpet for me. And so that's going to be nice. And but just leading up to it, there's been a wave of interviews and podcasts and just people emailing, looking for screeners for the film and stuff like that. So we're just sort of kind of following up on all that stuff, and it ends up being about one or two interviews like this a day, which I don't mind doing. I can sit here and work while I'm doing it. And well, you've been through all this, haven't you, Dice?
Well, we did that a couple of years ago, and for us it was really crazy. I don't think we handled it that, like, we couldn't really work while we're being interviewed. We weren't that smooth with our promotion period. It was actually a really messy period for us. We couldn't really work, and we weren't used to that kind of attention, and it wasn't necessarily a fun experience. I mean, it was a really good experience, but it was kind of rough.
Are you saying if you could do it again, you would have done it differently?
Maybe, yeah. Maybe, I assume so. Hopefully, if that ever happens again in the future, we'll be a little more strategic, so we don't stop everything else.
Right. Yeah. Do you know what we did? Passion Pictures, not we, but Cara at Passion. She hired a publicist, and she's been getting the word out about the film, and every day she sends us like the fruit of her labors, every day, like what publications we're getting into, because I think it's all about awareness for your film at this point. And so I think like she got us in the New York Times recently, and that was pretty cool. But that didn't happen by accident. That was something that was a result of her connections, and so I think at this point it's about awareness, it's like any kind of campaign. You got to, you got to let people know about your project and all that kind of thing. Because let's face it, Pixar is the heavily favored film to win this Academy Award, and it's going to take a lot for them not to win it.
Yeah. Things about your kind of how your career, kind of came about. Like I know you were from Vancouver. You went to film school in Vancouver, but you moved to San Francisco back in '92. Was that to get you were actually hired by a studio back in San Francisco, or you started your Maverick Studios back then?
No, I started working at a place called Colossal Pictures, and that's where I met, Mike Smith, Tony Stockey, Garrett Sheldrew, Bosco Stewart, Charlie Canfield, Dan McHale, Cindy Ng. Some of my favorite people in the world are the people that I met at Colossal Pictures. And that was, that studio was huge. They had like 3 different buildings. They employed about 150 people. I think I only spent about from 1993 until 1997 there. So it was a good 4 years. But they were good. They were really good years. And that's where I met Peter Chung, and we started working on EM Flux. That was probably the biggest takeaway from those years was working with Peter Chung. Aside from meeting everyone else like Ed Bell and Jamie Baker and Chris Haig and Simon O'Leary, pretty much when Colossal folded, those 150 people just spread around the world. Some of them went to Europe, and some of them went to different places in the States, and some of them went back to Canada. But it's like this big network of people just kind of went out. And so that was always a really kind of helpful thing, because at a certain point, I started traveling and working quite a bit. Well, for me, almost every job I've ever had has been, I know someone that's working on the production. So very rarely will a job come about from a complete stranger. There's usually somebody on the job, so, it makes sense that the more people the better chances of employment you're going to get. So, that was especially true in days before the internet. I guess it's a little bit different now, but there was a time where, you were kind of,
when did you decide to form your own studio then? You started Maverick Studios around the same time, no?
Yeah, we formed that in 1997. It was right after Colossal filed Chapter 11. And I started that with my girlfriend at the time. And we kind of went into it not knowing anything. Really about running a studio, but there was one thing that we both observed was that there was a lot of work floating around, advertising work floating around the Bay Area that would have gone to Colossal Pictures, and because Colossal basically didn't exist anymore, we just kind of formed a company so that we could start to get some of that work. So. Our first days at Maverick were pretty good. We pulled in about 3 commercial jobs, like some big Nike jobs, and but our advertising kind of success was a bit short-lived, and I think. We kind of decided to change what the studio was about after, say, 1998 or 1999, I guess. It was Jamie Baker's idea. We were both sitting in the studio, kind of lamenting our bad fortunes, And he turned to me and he said, "Hey man, let's do comic books." And I said, "What?" He goes, "Yeah. You remember the dream?" It was like that Blues Brothers moment. And I said, "Yeah, man, you're right. Let's do comic books." And that's really the turning point of that particular studio, because that's when we started to attract the likes of Stuart Lee, and Bosco, and Show, and Vaughn, and Victor, and we sort of put together the lineup of characters that kind of like the main lineup at Maverick Studios that we kind of went with for a few years, and Jamie Baker, and we were all sort of comics driven back then. We all had our regular jobs. Some of them were working at Pixar or ILM, but in the evening or on weekends, especially right before the San Diego Comic-Con, we'd all get together and we'd all sort of work on our own little projects separately, but together was kind of what we were doing. So we could never get our shit together to work on the same project, even though there was so much talent in that studio. If we had pulled our resources, we could have really, pulled something off, but we could just never get our shit together like that. So I think everybody was a little suspicious of everyone else there. They were like, "No, no, we'll just work on our own projects. It's okay." So, in that way, we never got involved in any politics there. So it was a very unpolitical sort of situation.
One thing we wanted to ask you, Robert, is just kind of going back to your Pear Cider film and a little bit of a technical thing. And I know it's kind of pretty famous that you animated everything on Photoshop, which is pretty mind-boggling for a lot of people in the animation community. And you pretty much did everything by yourself in terms of production of this film, right?
Yeah. Well, I should say that, I'll just say again that my producer, Cara Speller, was there with me, and she was kind of, the person I kind of believed in this project, after reading the books, and I sort of pitched the idea to her, and she was there with me the whole way. But in terms of actual production, it was just kind of me sitting here in this chair, and my friend Johnny Still came over for a while and from London and helped me for a while with some of the compositing. And there was a French guy that I met online. Like, I never met him before, but he introduced himself, and we became friends, and he helped me for a while doing some compositing. But other than that, I didn't really have a budget, and I didn't want to ask for favors from people. So I just kind of just, I didn't want to get into a situation where I owed anybody anything. And so I just kind of, I went, kind of worked with the resources that I had, and that was kind of it.
That's awesome. It's amazing. Narration was done by you, Robert?
That was me, yeah. I know it doesn't sound like me.
No, I was just shocked when I read about it, but it's pretty nice work there too.
Well, my son, he coughed in my mouth there about a year ago, in my open mouth. When I was yawning, he just coughed right inside of it. And then I woke up the next morning, and my voice was a full register deeper. And I woke up, and I just said the first few lines of the narration. I went, "I received a Christmas card this morning," except it was so much deeper and gravelier. And I just went, "Oh my God, I have to record my voice right now." So I phoned my friend Colin Beadle, and he got me in touch with a guy that he knows named Uwe Braun. And Uwe had his own kind of recording setup at his house. So within a few hours, I was over in his apartment here in Vancouver, and he set everything up, and he unplugged his fridge, and we put the cats in a different room, and he set me up in a microphone, and he was in the other room, and I read the whole thing from start to finish, and it felt like one take, but there was a couple more takes in there. But once I said the first few words, which was, I received a Christmas card this morning, and then all of a sudden it all just fell into place, and I could almost remember verbatim the entire script. So it took about 3 hours to record the whole thing. And, listening to it now, as much as I hate to admit it, the voiceover that took about 3 hours probably leaves as much of an impression as the animation, which took over 2 years to do. So, that's kind of strange, isn't it? I think, but there's one thing that I knew for sure, is I didn't want to get any celebrity voices involved in this project. Because I think, well, it doesn't matter what I think, but I just wasn't into that kind of thing.
It's awesome, Robert, how you told us a couple stories, how misfortune has actually led to like really great things and really great art. That's so inspiring. It's so cool. And
you mean like the coughing in the mouth stuff?
the coughing in the mouth, yeah, or yeah. I mean, you're working right now. What do you do? Can we know a little bit? What are you up to now? Working on?
I'm working on the next Gorillaz music video.
Oh, cool.
Oh, wow.
That's awesome.
And we're well into it. And it's directed by Jamie Hewlett and myself. But Jamie's really directing it. You know what I mean? Like he's all over this job. So we talk to him every day. So I guess you could say I'm the animation director, but I'm working with this guy, Daryl Graham. He's another Canadian. And holy crap, is that guy ever doing amazing work on this job? Holy crap. I have to admit, like I've been sort of busy with this whole Oscar thing, and I'm doing the best I can. But Daryl really is doing the most amazing work on this thing. So we're kind of living in a post-Pete Candyland era as far as the Gorillaz is concerned. Mm-hmm. This is the first 2D Gorillaz job without him. And so, Pete left, because we're all huge Pete Candyland fans. And Pete pretty much established the animation style and kind of like, he kind of established the high watermark, really. Mm-hmm. For me, it's Clint Eastwood Gorillaz. Like, I don't know if anything will be ever as good as Gorillaz. Only because that was the first time we saw this stuff, Yeah. So even if we did something that was equally as good now, it still wouldn't have that same kind of feel like this is the first time you looked at it, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally.
So, but it's going to be done in about a month, and we have a whole lot of work to do, and yeah. So I think the first single is going to be released like around the middle of March, maybe the 20th or something like that.
I can't wait.
Cannot wait. That's awesome.
Great, Robert. Well, really, thank you so much. It's actually we ended up talking longer than I promised. But
you did?
Really,
10:57. Holy crap! Does that ever go by quick, eh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really fun episodes. And, super inspiring, and best of luck at the Oscars. We're definitely rooting for you for sure. I mean, there are a lot of amazing films being nominated, and we know a lot of them as well, but definitely your film is one film, like underdog kind of personal film, indie personal film that we're definitely rooting for.
I bet you $100 it won't win.
You never know. You never know.
You never know. Like stranger things have happened this year, right?
That's right.
That's true.
Yep.